What's up, everybody? Noah Kisser back here for another interview. Today I have Tyler MacIntyre, the director of It's a Wonderful Knife. How are you doing today, sir?
Doing well, man. Thanks so much for having me.
How much love has this film gotten, and are you surprised by how well this film has been received, even past Christmas?
I'm always a little surprised because you never quite know. But yeah, no, it's been doing well. People seem to connect with it. It's a bit of a subversive take on a traditional Christmas thing. So we knew we could ruffle some feathers, and I know Fox News got a little upset about it for a moment there. But other than that, it's been. But what we expected. It's been people have been very open to it. It's a very sincere movie, so I'm glad that some people have liked it.
So with the title, it has sort of the same story as a classic It's a Wonderful Life. Was there any pressure doing that, taking that name, and any pressure trying to recreate scenes from it?
Yeah, it's not a beat for beat like remake of It's a Wonderful Life, and I love that movie, and so it's just like we didn't want to be super beholden to it. Like we know the title's obviously a riff on it, and like the kind of sort of magical realism kind of inciting incident to the story is similar, but just because that's so pervasive in culture and very much like tied into Christmas, like we knew it could provide some fun opportunities to kind of put our own spin on that. But we really took more of a cue from like kind of what's popular in terms of Christmas movies these days, as in like Hallmark movies and like those sorts of like kind of made for streaming like holiday movies. And so we're taking some of those tropes and kind of trying to subvert them, in addition to like it wasn't just about kind of making our version of It's a Wonderful, or make a horror version of It's a Wonderful Life. Like we definitely wanted to be its own thing, and even that movie in itself is kind of a bit of a riff on A Christmas Carol and things like that. So like we definitely wanted to kind of be like the fun kind of horror comedy film that's in that realm, without being like particularly beholden to it. So we didn't feel like a ton of pressure kind of either way. We did do a double feature screening at the Rio Theater in Vancouver, where they played It's a Wonderful Life and then It's a Wonderful Knife. So that was kind of fun. But other than that, yeah, not I wouldn't say a ton of pressure, no.
Okay. So you said that this film went to theaters. I believe this is the first film of yours that went wider.
Yeah. Sorry. I just didn't catch the last part there.
So this opened to what, like 1,000 theaters?
Yeah, about 1,000 theaters in the U.S. Yeah,
mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so yeah, that's more than my last movie, Tragedy Girls, or no, well, actually not last movie. Yeah, a couple of movies ago, Tragedy Girls had about 100 theaters, I think, at one point. But that was like not really intended to be like a wide theatrical, and you kind of have to figure that out, and like the economics of it are a bit tricky. So this is the first one of mine that partially because they liked the movie and kind of believed in it, and then part of it was just that there was because of the strikes and stuff like that, there was a bit of a lack of, or like a bit of a window that kind of opened up, so we were able to kind of slip in there to some more theaters, and the programmers liked it, so it ended up being, or the bookers liked it rather, and we ended up being able to get it out there, and so that was good to see.
With this film, what was the scariest scene to shoot, whether it was doing a horror scene or was it a weather issue? Since you shot this in March and right before the strikes happened, what was the scariest part of doing this film?
Well, I mean, yeah, like COVID was still very much a problem. Like when we were doing, or still a problem. But it was very much like we shot under like COVID restrictions. So like we had to test everybody every day, and then we'd have like we got off pretty light, all things considered, but that was like a pretty scary element of it, because like you'd be like, oh, your key grip's down, like, or whatever, and it's just there's no way to you have to kind of pivot, and you didn't know who else was exposed, and we didn't know when that was going to drop, so like but it just kind of became part of what we were, and I got it during pre-production, so it was I'm glad it didn't happen during production, but so that's part of it. But like I would say the individual scenes, like and sequences, like I really liked filming the scene outside with Dimitri Vegas getting attacked with there's an axe and like it's kind of outside, and it started raining, and it ended up being kind of a fun sequence. We had some amount of time to do that. So that was good. Whereas some of the other set pieces we were doing, like, we're very tight schedule, like overall it's an 18-day shoot, which is not very much. And so I was constantly kind of trying to figure out, like, well, how do we exactly, get what we need to? We'll kind of try to make it as fun as we can. So just being under that pressure was kind of like, I think the toughest thing for me, just in terms of like the schedule and scope of because we were trying to do something that was more ambitious on the script level than we probably had the resources for. But we, I think we'll be able to make some pretty judicious decisions about that, and kind of I think a lot of things worked out, so which was nice to see.
And there are a lot of night shots here, so that required a lot of late night shoots. Did that get to you or anybody in the cast? Did you lose anybody due to the late night shoots?
Yeah, people get kind of loopy when you're shooting all night. Like the thing is, I mean, and we realized this, like when I was working on the script with Michael Kennedy, like in development, I just kind of do some tweaks. It's like, this is 85% night. Like it's actually like it's much more than the average horror movie, even, and so it's mostly night shoots. We had so what you try and do is at a certain point you have to kind of shoot all night. But the thing is, when we were shooting was March, April of 2023. And so there's actually not even, the average shooting day is 12 hours. And there isn't even 12 hours of darkness at that point. Mm-hmm. So so you can't really even, the sun just comes up. So that was a bit of an issue, especially when shooting the climax and some of the longer kind of sequences is like, oh, like the sun is coming up, therefore we can't shoot anything else, And so we would do tricky things schedule wise, where we would, schedule one scene that's in the day and then try and switch everyone over to nights, and then, things like that. But there just wasn't enough day material. So it was a very tricky thing schedule wise, and people do get kind of loopy on the crew, night wise, because you end up working all night and then you drive home and it's the morning, and then you sleep all day, and then you're very groggy, and then you sort of, like, on the weekends, do you switch back, or how do you kind of half switch back? And it doesn't really, it doesn't go great, and it could run people down. And so, like, we had a first AD that was having trouble kind of dealing with the night's schedule stuff, and he had another job, so we kind of moved on to that early, which was during production, which was not good for us. And I mean, nothing against that decision. It's kind of a personal one, but like, it definitely was tough on people to shoot. You're doing an independent movie, you're trying to do a lot in this time, and then to add on the kind of more of a exhaustion factor to it than there probably should be. And then there's like a mentalness, it's like you can get kind of silly in the middle of the night, and that was more of a factor for, I think, some of the actors and stuff like that. But it ended up being pretty fun.
With this film, was this harder than any of your other films, since you wrote 2 of your other films, right? Two or 3 of them?
Yeah. I've written, I think I've written everything else. Actually, no, I did an episode of Into the Dark for Blumhouse that I didn't write, but yeah, I usually write stuff.
That was Good Boy, I think, right?
Yeah.
So is it easier to shoot your films that you wrote yourself, or is it harder to shoot those since you want it to be that way that you wrote it? Or is it harder to shoot films that you didn't write, like this one?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely find it easier to shoot movies that I've written, usually because you just kind of have a very clear idea, and also you have some more kind of tools in your toolbox to deal with those issues. Like, like sometimes you can put, like, you become as a director very aware of the script and why everything's there, and you try and ask a billion questions, and so if you didn't write the script, you can become as familiar as you want to be or need to be with the scripts, so that what elements are where to put your time, essentially. Whereas when you wrote something, it's much easier to have that organic kind of attachment to it, so you can and it's a little bit easier to, I find, you're less precious about things because you can reconcept them and know that that's fine. Whereas I, like, especially on a movie like this, where like Michael Kennedy wrote the script, but then also was a producer on it. So like I want to be a good collaborator, and like the reason I want to do this script is like it's kind of like unlike stuff I would write, like in terms of it has a certain sincerity to it that a lot of stuff that I write doesn't and it has like heart in a way that some of my other stuff doesn't. And so I want to preserve that, and therefore you're a little bit less I find myself less inclined when I didn't write something to re-concept things kind of in the moment, and whereas I do that much more on my own stuff, and that's just because you know, have a certain relationship with logistics, and so I would try and like when things like that were necessary, like we had some like weather related issues and things like that, so I had to, you know, move a scene that was like an outside party scene into an indoor kind of thing, and you know, had to figure that out logistically, and then, you know, kind of run it by Michael because he was right there with us. You know, he's a producer's on set and stuff. So and was helpful in that regard when we had to, you know, make those pivots.
So how did this film come to you? Because you weren't the first one that they came to, right? Did somebody else leave the
Yeah,
spot?
yes, yeah. There was no director on it for a bit. Like they'd approached me originally, like when they first were looking for people, and I pitched on it, and I wasn't sure. Like, you know, I had a couple other balls in the air. Like I was doing a writer's room for a show that we'd sold and stuff like that. So we weren't even sure it was going to work out anyway. But then they went with another director and worked with him for a bit, and then just I think after a couple months just couldn't really see eye to eye, and then so they circled back, and that was available. So we were able to make it work.
Mm-hmm.
And that, yeah, it happens all the time. You know, like there's a lot of, you know, and I try not to be too weird about it too. Like, cause I've, you know, been a producer, I produce things, you know, and sometimes when you kind of circle back to people, they're a bit like, well, why didn't you go with me the first, you know? And I've never really like actually create, you know, I've always been that way with casting and stuff like that. Like you often, you know, you sometimes you don't like, you get kind of forced into not necessarily even picking your first choice or somebody you even prefer out of the options. And I've always tried to just kind of be like, well, you know, like we are making something together, like, you know, and you kind of, I think when you bring in baggage like that outside of it, it doesn't really, you know, help. But yeah, you know, like, you know, you tend to kind of roll with the punches, and I think we were able to kind of work together and make something fun.
With the casting, right? Was Joel the first one that you got on board, or was he right before you came on?
He was on yeah, like he was what they call like attached, which is like there's not necessarily a deal in place, but he's like, you know, they're aware of the product, you know, they decide that like, yeah, you can tell people I intend to be in this. And then there was a bit of a question of like whether or not he was going to remain attached when they switched directors. And then he ended up, like we met and he saw some of my stuff and we had a call and he was like, great, let's do this. So we sort of stayed on. So technically, yeah, he was on before me. So.
And with Justin Long, was this before or after his Goosebumps season?
This was right after, like, so he was kind of wrapping up Goosebumps. Like he was on our list of like people, you know, kind of early on, and we had gone through a bunch of different like offers of like trying to figure out like, you know, we were sort of trying to adjust we wanted somebody who was a bit outlandish, and we were trying to kind of like find the actor and then sort of meld Mr. Waters to fit a performance that they were excited to give, you know, and so Justin was in the discussions and we didn't know. You know, if he was available, and originally he wasn't available because he was doing Goosebumps, and then we ended up pushing so late into because we knew we had to do this in the winter, and we ended up doing it in March, April, which is like the tail end of winter, if winter at all. Yeah. And so it's really more spring, and yeah, so they were wrapping up Goosebumps about as expected, and he was already up in Vancouver and kind of familiar with shooting there, so it just sort of worked out where we were able to, you know, kick him an offer, and we had a meeting about it, and he seemed to really get the tone of it. So yeah, he came on like we overlapped Goosebumps by like a couple days.
So who was the hardest one to cast? Which character was the hardest one to cast to you?
For sure, Mr. Waters. Like just the number of iterations of like people that we had to consider and ways we had to pivot things. You know, and a lot of it was just timing. You know, like there was. You know, like there was things were kind of slowing down because it was leading into the strike, and you know, but was also hadn't really ramped up again after COVID, and you know, and we were unsure, you know, which city we were shooting in, and you know, like it was a number of factors that we were able to that had to kind of coalesce, and but we were able to figure it out, and yeah, so I would say Henry Waters was for sure the hardest one to cast, and I'm so glad we got Justin for it. But then beyond that, probably Bernie was probably the most difficult, like traditional casting thing where we were casting like a very wide net, and because it was such a specific kind of strangeness and kind of comedy and kind of heart of the movie that they have to bring. And so, you know, we did we considered a lot of actors and read like hundreds of actors for Bernie, and ended up with a wonderful young actor, Jess McLeod, out of Vancouver, and they just did a tremendous job.
So this film is available on Blu-ray on April 9th.
Yes.
What are the bonus features? Is there gag reel? What's on this? And do you have a say in what goes on to the physical media?
Yeah, we have a bit of say. Like, it's always a bit of an afterthought, I find, because of the move to streaming and stuff like that. But I always try and take a little bit more time with it because it's important to me, because I grew up, really absorbing a lot of things from special features and really enjoying those as a part of the movies that I watched when I was a kid. And so I always try and make sure that there's some good stuff there. There's I forget all that's on it, but there's some audio commentaries, like Michael Kenny and I did one, and then Nick Piotnik, who's the director of photography, and I did one that was a bit more on the technical side, which is might be interesting for people who are maybe filmmakers themselves or getting into filmmaking in really any capacity. And I put in some storyboards and stuff like that. Like there's like a storyboard like featurette where you can sort of see one of the action sequences with the storyboards for it, and kind of see how that was planned out and executed. And then there's a bit of stuff about the angel and things like that, and kind of how that character kind of came together. And there's but the kind of crown jewel of it is there's this really great documentary, like a making of documentary called Better Off, directed by Alice 13, who's was there on set with us the whole time, and shot a lot of really great kind of behind the scenes footage. And since they were embedded kind of with the crew and the cast, really got to know people, and was able to get some very candid interviews in a way that you don't really see in a lot of movies these days. And and so they put together like a really solid, like it's like 22 or 24 minutes, like it's a good length of time that kind of covers a lot of all of the good stuff, I think. And I'm really glad that they were able to put that together, because it's my favorite thing on the disc for sure.
One thing that I had a lot of people ask, what does the film, how do I say this? Okay. What does A Wonderful Life mean to you? What does that mean to you? And what is A Wonderful Life to you?
Yeah. So, I mean, for me, the thing that I feel most fortunate about, like getting to make kind of movies for a living, is that they become this great kind of time capsule of like who you are and who your friends are, and a lot of the people that I work with are often people that I consider, or that I'm kind of close to, or that like I've like one of my good friends is a cinematographer on this, and like one of my good friends is the editor, and the composer, and like a lot of people that I've worked with before, and people who became friends. And so like when I look back on films like my first film Patchwork is a very much like kind of like a very good screenshot for me of like who I was in my like late 20s, when I was like getting ready to make that movie. And so like there's a lot, and there's people in there that are like there's scenes shot in my apartment. There's like like there's like my cars in there somewhere, like just and like other than just the little things, but there's turns of phrase that you used to use, and inside jokes that are there that no one else does, and all of these things that make it yours. Like I don't watch my own movies a lot, but when you do, years out, it's very rewarding, because it's a very complicated piece of art that takes a long time to do. And so it's a little bit like flipping through an old sketchbook or reading an old short story, or these sorts of things. And that's what I find most rewarding. And I find that it's, like, so when we were able to make this movie, like I know it was a very personal story to Michael, and became very personal to our leads, particularly Jane Widdop and Jess McLeod. And so I always kind of remember looking back, like seeing them really kind of like take ownership over this, and kind of being there, and kind of realizing like, oh, actually, since this is a collaboration, there's dozens of people, hundreds of people involved in this. this means as much to them as it does like my first movies when I did, them when I was, like closer to their age. And you make these kind of relationships and you find these things out about yourself. And that's like the act of making it and figuring out who you are through art is really what's rewarding about it. And so when, so I get why people are like defensive and stuff like that when things come out and, people review stuff because people are watching a movie being like, I spent 90 minutes watching this and just didn't really like it, or whatever. And it's like, and then some people can get really wound up about that, and because it's very personal to them. And you have to kind of, separate yourself a bit from it, and so I try and take everything with, kind of a grain of salt, and I'm getting healthy and healthy about that as I get older. But like like the reception of it, like I try and listen to the way people are reacting to it and listen to the authenticity of that and try and use that to inform what I'm doing. But it doesn't really, at the end of the day, kind of matter because it was already an experience that I've kind of went through, and that's what's most meaningful to me, not necessarily the reaction to it. Does that make sense?
Yes. So as a horror filmmaker, what horror films made you want to do this genre in particular? And would you ever stretch out into a comedy or a drama or a rom-com out of your zone?
For sure, man. Yeah, I mean, I love comedy, definitely. Like I think most of my movies are kind of Trojan horse comedies anyway, because they don't really make comedies anymore, and comedies are very tough to get off the ground. But if you're making a horror movie that has some jokes in it, they'll let you do that. So as long as you don't say it's a horror comedy, because that scares the shit out of them. And once they're in the movie and people are laughing, people are like, oh yeah, I guess this does work. And then they'll be like, then they'll walk out and forget that that's what happened. It's really crazy. But I would say, yeah, I'm always on the lookout for things that are a little different. And I love horror. And a lot of the movies that I grew up with were things like like Evil Dead 2 and Dead Alive and Reanimator and those sorts of movies that were kind of more splat stick. Yeah, and so that's been kind of my little niche that I tend to kind of push things towards, and a lot of my ideas kind of tend to come in that area. But I also have other movies that I'm hoping to make that will push me outside of that. And yeah, that's the goal, is to kind of show some more sides. But there's also, you have to balance that with like what is available to get made, because I know a lot of people who have either made one movie or no movies, and then will spend a lot of time trying to get another film off the ground, and then just everything dies on the vine, and then years fall off the calendar that way. And I think you need to keep making stuff, or else things that never actually happen, and that's a very easier said than done, for sure. But it's like I will never criticize somebody for finishing a movie, just because I know how hard it is. And even if, and I think that I have a lot more respect for somebody who made a movie that did not turn out than for somebody who wanted to make a really great movie that they never got to do.
Mm-hmm. Were there any scenes that you had to cut that you regret cutting, or was everything on screen that was on the page?
Yeah, we didn't. There's not a ton on. I think only cut one or two little things that were not that. Like we didn't really. There wasn't a ton of extra stuff. It was we trimmed the script down more or less just to kind of fit the schedule. Like we didn't want to hemorrhage extra time on shooting scenes that we weren't going to use, because it's not really how those sorts of movies are constructed, I guess. So we only had a one very short scene that wasn't in there, I think. This was the only one I can think about, and then beyond that, it's just lines and things like that were in alts that were exercised. So not a ton of deleted scene stuff, which is why there's not on the Blu-ray.
Yeah. And who was the one actor who was the jokester who made everybody break on camera where you had to do one more take?
I mean, probably Sean Deppner. And it's interesting because I think because he did, like him and Justin had a really funny thing going. And Justin Long is very hilarious too. And like Joel's super funny. But doesn't, weirdly, I think Sean Deppner, because of, he has this kind of sort of friendly kind of energy and stuff like that. And I think people weren't expecting him to be so hilarious, and he is, and he was there a lot of, like, he had shot on a lot of different days throughout the schedule, but had a lot of, you know, his head in the game in terms of like finding the comedy for his character Buck. And yeah, I think he's super funny, and that's another thing, he's really funny in that documentary too, if you check that out.
So I have a couple friends who make films, right? And
Great.
each set is different. So are you the filmmaker who helps move the cameras and everything, or what was this? Was this a set where everybody had their own job and they did that one job and that's it? So like, why you moved everything?
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, like it depends on like a lot of it depends on where you're shooting and stuff like that. Like my first movie was, you know, like with a crew of fucking 11 people or something. Like it was, you know, like it's not you know, like you have to kind of, you know, the lines are very blurry. Whereas this was because it was, you know, for AMC, and, you know, it was kind of put together more traditionally in a when we shot in Vancouver. Like Vancouver is a very strong union town, and so we had, like, you know, like union, you know, like people like working on it mostly. And so like, you know, there, you know, there's a point of pride of like, this is how we do things, you know, in your, so like they don't want you to do things that are outside of your job description, because that means that they're not doing their end of the stick. So yeah, like it was more that yeah, it was more of a full crude shoot than a lot of things. But as a result, like I don't think that necessarily makes it less like indie. Is very, you know, like indie in terms of like we did things about as indie as you can, you know, in that setting. But yeah, like you know, I have done like I used to operate a lot more when I was younger. But you know, there's better people, better operators than me. You know, like the guy, you know, Kenneth, who is our operator on this, is great. You know, like, and so, you know, you want to try and help people make you look good, you know, like, and so therefore you don't want to necessarily be moving the camera around, because there's people who are better at it than you. And so you know, and you know, as much as that seems like a very kind of appealing kind of indie attitude a lot of the time, like you know, like you know, not everyone's Steven Soderbergh, not everyone can think like that, you know, like nor should they, you know, like, and there's something very weird about popping out from behind a camera, being like given a piece of direction and going back, you know, and like throws actors off. And so, you know, like people can get into it and get used to it, but you know, you have to kind of find your footing within the constraints of the way you're working. And you do that every time, you know, like I find that you tend, like the stuff you're shooting the first day, you're always like, oh, it's pretty good. And then once you look at your last day, you look back at the first day and you're like, ooh, rough, you know, like, because you hadn't found, you know, your groove yet.
Yeah. What holiday or story would you want to do? Would you do like an Easter film, a Easter slasher film? Or
I mean, Easter's already a zombie story, so we don't really need to you know, inject too much horror into that. But yeah, I mean, not really other holidays that stick out to me. I mean, Halloween's cool, obviously, but like I think Halloween can be an element in other non-horror specific stories, because it's been so beat to death. But yeah, I don't really have any, like, you know, we getting pretty deep into the list of holidays, you know, to be hard pressed to find a new one. So you know, like, and even like Into the Dark, I think my episode was supposed to be like Pet Appreciation Day or something, or that's when it came out. Anyway, like, so like, you know, if we're on that level, you know, I don't really necessarily, you know, I don't, you know, I'm not really particularly beholden to holiday movies, even though like a lot of those I really enjoy.
And I got 3 more questions. What are your favorite films of all time? And what are your favorite horror and your favorite Christmas films? Because I'm a Christmas guy, and that's mostly where my channel thrives, right around that season. So what are your favorite films of all time, horror and Christmas films?
Jesus. Okay. Yeah, I mean, my favorite films of all time are things like Back to the Future. I think is a perfect movie. You know, I think like Bonnie and Clyde, I really love. I think that movie's has some amazing moments. And like City Lights is you know, a fair, like, it's very, you know, old school now. And or like a Canadian film I love called Last Night. That's one of my top five probably. So just stuff like that. Like it's all a little a little specific to you. But my favorite horror films, like I mentioned Evil Dead and Dead Alive and Reanimator earlier. Those are all definitely up there for me. I like a lot of the like I like a lot of Edgar Wright stuff. Like I really love Shaun of the Dead, and I like a lot of even like Tucker and Dale versus Evil. I think is amazing, and the Host, like or the Host that the South Korean movie.
Yeah.
The creature feature I think is so good. Like that's probably one of my top 10 movies. And it's just so it's amazing. And then Christmas movies like I would say Scrooge is probably my favorite like Christmas movie, and it's kind of a Christmas horror movie. But like I really gravitate towards like the Nightmare Before Christmas and like Christmas Vacation and stuff like that. Like movies that had a little bit of like darkness to them, but were still Christmas. Those were the kind of ones I liked in rotation when I was watching more Christmas movies when I was a kid.
Thank you so much. This has been a joy to talk to you and a great honor. Where can we find you on social media? And can you tease anything about what's coming down the pipeline?
Oh, I mean, yeah, I'm working on a new spec right now, which is which is like a supernatural slasher, which is kind of fun. I was hoping to, get that going soon, and then have some other irons in the fire. But yeah, no, you can find me at Ty MacIntyre at Ty.MacIntyre on Instagram, and at TMacFilm on Twitter. If anyone, or X, I guess, if anyone's still on there, seems like I'm going down with the ship. So,
and I will have the Amazon link down below to buy It's a Wonderful Knife on Blu-ray and DVD, or you can stream it now on Shudder. Thank you guys for watching this video. Follow us on everything. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, and thank you for stopping by. And we will see all of you guys next time.